Orc, the bardic paladin, who sings and plays again. He tells the tales of glory and weaves a magic story. He'll join you at your table and ask you to share a fable. Heroes of humble origin, villains who must be fought again. No matter their skill or prowess, the people in life are countless. So we pray you heed our request. Enjoy this tale of sidekicks and side quests.
Episode 134, Daniel the Bobyr Baker. Welcome to Sidekicks and Side Quests, the Dungeons & Dragons podcast that helps to put humans back into humanity and breathe life into your campaign NPCs with backstory and bravado. That's right, we're building a world, one character at a time. I am your host, Kurt Krenwelge, the Bardic Paladin, and I'll be joining Dylan's table in the Levitating Platter. Hello, and welcome to another exciting episode of Sidekicks and Side Quests, the best unofficial Dungeons & Dragons podcast, in my humbly biased opinion. I've got an awesome guest for you this week, but before we get to my mystery contestant, I have to leave you in suspense with the ad read. This episode is brought to you by Plus One EXP and their brand new RPG Zine Club. Zine Club is a monthly membership subscription service featuring fresh zines from emerging and expanding creators across the globe. It's our way of inviting GMs, players, and zine lovers everywhere to invest more intentionally in the creative community. It's crowdsourced support without crowdfunding. So this service offers monthly releases that they put out in two 20 to 44 page saddle stitch zines. 3 different flavors. Take your pick from story zines, adventure zines, and all of the zines. You can pick your format of print and digital, or just get digital only for your favorite titles. Join the Clubhouse Discord section of the Plus One EXP community on Discord. Get the best prices guaranteed from your subscription that you're going to get each month. You get a private subscription portal where you can manage your subscription, add products, or change your information. Change your frequency monthly, every other month, something else. You pick how often you want these new titles to arrive. You only get what you want. And if you miss a month, why, you can always go back and add a title to your recent month's order. Get an annual surprise each February after your first anniversary. Get access to special content with interviews, how to play videos, special content for Zine Club titles. Get a free pizza if you fill out one of the RPG Zine Club passports, or redeem it for a free pizza at events where Tony is present himself. You're going to get access to new and known designers, the best voices from across the RPG design community. And know that Plus One EXP and RPG Zine Club curate their zines based on community interest and feedback to help you discover your new favorite creators. There's a DIE focus because Plus One is committed to championing diversity, inclusion, and equity in their projects. Creators with diverse experiences make our community better. So Zine Club prioritizes creating equity for all of our creators. And it's more than a purchase. Your subscriptions will let us invest more heavily in our print partners and provide them with potentially life-changing support by consolidating scores or hundreds of purchases as the club grows. So, if you want to learn more, I would recommend that you go to the website rpgzine.club, again, rpgzine.club, and if you want, go to plus1exp.com, and when you're buying stuff on that site, beard balms or lip balms or beard RPGs or whatnot, and you need a discount code at checkout, be sure to use the code Randolph, RANDOLPH, at checkout and get some savings on your purchase at no extra cost to you. Again, website is plus1exp.com, and the Zine Club website is rpgzine.club. All right. And without further ado, I turn the microphone over to my guest and I ask, hello, mystery contestant. Would you care to introduce yourself? Tell us who it is that you are and what is it that you do?
My name is Dylan. My pronouns are he, they, and I am the co-producer, co-host, co-founder of Kill Every Monster and Dead Ghost Productions. We are a D&D kind of criticism show, walking through the monster manual one creature at a time and just sort of sorting out what stories the monsters are meant to tell and how well they do it.
Yeah, I was gonna say I was trying to recall in my memory, like where was the first mention? It would have been back when Twitter was more of a thing, and I think I was getting ready to do some yard work, and I was
Mhm.
like, "Oh, I think I saw this thing on Twitter. What's this? Oh, Kill Every Monster. Oh, the Banshee episode. Okay, well let me put that on." And so I remember doing the yard work and like hearing the flow of the episode and how, and then it carried on to the Goblin, the next one. I was like, oh, this is really cool. Like,
I
getting to do
appreciate
like
it.
these
Yeah.
deep dive discussions on like what's presented in the text and then like, you know, what is inspired from actual like fairy tales and myth and cultural significance and stuff like that. To then like offering suggestions of like how you could make them feel more like their inspiration points. And then you do like this really cool deep dive immersive role playing one shot basically,
Yeah.
where then the guest gets to be the monster and then Aram is usually some sort of arrogant foolhardy adventurer that
Yeah.
has to contend with the monster and more times than not has ended up perishing from his own hubris.
I think we've gotten a pretty good split on Aram dying. I don't know that he's won that often, but he doesn't always die. He
Right.
does an okay job.
Mhm.
Uh no, he's very good at coming in and playing just an utter prick to where
Mm.
like you can feel good about the player character losing.
Yeah, and so I'm just kind of curious, with the shtick from the beginning of the show is, Aram does God's Fall,
Mhm.
and stuff like that, and then your bit is like, oh, I'm the physicist from Canada, so like, what was the formation of Kill Every Monster like? How did that all come to be?
So that intro apparently has gotten misread a couple of times. It seems to read a little bit as like arrogance on my part. Aram always comes in with sort of the announcer voice. I produced God's Fall and I've done these things and I have all these, credentials in the RPG space. And I'm from Canada, got a
That's your
degree in
claim to
physics.
fame.
That's like I know some stuff, I guess. Like for me, it was meant to be like self-deprecating, just like I don't
Mm.
actually have an RPG credential. I played the games for a while, and I'm a big dork. I know numbers. That's about it.
It's how I feel like me. It's like, it's amazing getting to see all these other guests of the show that have like, gone on to do stuff at like San Diego Comic-Con or Gen
Mhm.
Con and stuff like that. And
Yeah,
I root for them and I cheer them on. But I think to myself, like, that's probably not going to be me. No one's waiting for me with a red envelope saying like, oh, Mr. Kurtz, your chance is awaiting you. Would you please join us up on the stage? I would
no, but
be honored if they would, but I'm not expecting it.
no, but that's also to come back to your actual question. Sort of the thing. Like I know Aram because I went to Gen Con one year, and I just came to talk to him, and I was just like, "Hey, God's Fall is a great show." I had like just recently moved cities, so like I think the thing I actually told him was like, it's the little piece of home. Like I always listened to it on the drive to school and everything when I was living with my parents, and then I moved to this new city. Didn't know anybody, didn't know where the I was, didn't know what was going on, but I could listen to the podcasts and like, okay, this is a thing that I still have.
Mm.
Um, and that was really my credential. And then like we talked for a while, we got to be friends, and we knew each other for like a couple of years. And then eventually, Aram was just like, we should look at working on something together. We should work on a thing. And I kept coming back to him, going like, yeah, but like there's 20,000 actual plays. I don't necessarily have an idea that's like set apart from the pack. Like it'd just be another D&D show, which nothing wrong with that, but like
Mhm.
I have a impulse in the back of my head of just, if you're not doing something that doesn't already exist, why are you doing it?
Right.
And then one day I came back and I was like, Arama, I know the thing we could do. I want to complain about the monster manual. I'm mad about it. There are too many monsters that are just like functionally a bear. Like in 3.5 in Pathfinder, there was this tendency, like monsters had attack patterns. And the most common one was this creature has a multi-attack. It does a claw bite, 2 claw attacks, then a bite attack, and that's what its turn looks like. And you start going through the monster manual with that lens, and you go like, oh, that's a bear. That's a bear. That bear has a fly speed. That's also a bear. And you start picking apart the mechanics, and you start seeing like all of the times where it's like, or even just, I will call things like the Kuatoa or the Swagan, or however you pronounce it. I don't know. I've never figured it out. I refer to them as wet goblins, because when you look at the stat block, like there's all these bits of lore that never really get touched on because those monsters don't get used frequently. But mechanically, it's a goblin. It's just an orc again. You know, these monsters are all the same thing, but then we just attached new lore to it, which is a thing of beauty when you're running games, to be able to just like grab something, like to just pick up the kobold stat block and be like, good enough. This is my gnome trap maker today. But when you're looking through the book and looking for new ideas and you're just seeing the same thing presented over and over again, that annoyed me. So that was sort of the genesis, was talking that over. And I think we batted the idea around for God knows how long, couple months. And I think it all came together with RK Wild, who was on the Deva episode, was the one who, like, Aram had started trying to add in this idea of like an overarching plot to it, and we do these APs and they'd all be connected, and all of the guests would get to kill the monster that they came on to talk about. And it was RK who was like, no. What you're going to do is you're going to have the guests play the monster, because if they're coming in invested in the monster, why would you make them murder it? Like, if that's the part they care about, give it to them. And that was sort of one of the moments of crystallization, and we ran from there, you know?
Yeah, no, I always look forward to the episodes, and I'm always learning something new, and a number of those things have directly influenced some of my games from now on, like this, without getting too self-aggrandizing or patting myself too well on the back. It's like the Modron episode, combining that with what we learned with the Loki MCU show and the TVA. Like, that's how the Modrons now, well, they're part of a big bad evil guy army, but it's like functionally, it's like, yeah, they're like time minions of this big bad evil,
No,
calculating in the background.
That's a perfect place to put them. That lines up perfectly with what the lore wants them to do.
And then the Rakshasas, we had a KP on recently this season, so I know I've been using Rakshasas, a lot recently, and so getting to like think back on that episode of like, oh, how they're vain and building these grand palaces and like being full of hubris, but not fully a traditional devil, but also kind of leaning into demons. So that's even affected how I've
devil
thought.
than anything else in the monster manual, though.
And so yeah, now they've got this whole ecology in my version of the 9 circles of hell, and then the black pit, which is the abyss, and how they're kind of like, oh, they originally existed in the black pit, but then when the hells were formed, it's like that's what gave them their inspiration for having corporeal forms and seeking material goods and stuff like that. And they're kind of like annoying neighbors to all the devils and demons that are trapped there and stuff like that.
Okay,
And they
yeah,
kind
I
of
can
don't
catch
really
that.
answer to anyone. They just do their own thing.
That ain't bad. I like that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I could sit here and gab. I mean, I know we've, Glyza, champion was on recently, and so she got to, talk about dragon turtles on her episode with y'all. So a lot of
he's
good
fantastic.
stuff. If you're not listening to Kill Every Monster, I have no problems plugging other podcasts in the middle of my podcast. So you should go check Dylan out.
Always appreciated.
You're more like the straight man, and then Aram is kind of like the goof on the show, where he entertains all these like sillier sorts of ideas, and you're like, no, Aram, it's this way. You're like wet goblin or bear or whatever, and he's like, well, no, don't you see? It's really like this, and this is how it should be, and you're just like, Aram, you are ridiculous.
Aram is fantastic for this, because I think Aram really does fit the average player, right? Like, Aram is reading what is intended.
Mm-hmm.
And that's usually what he's talking about. When we disagree, it's usually Aram is reading what the book says it should be and attaching to that. And he's right. That is a great way to run things. I'm just a little bit fixated on, okay, you can tell me that's what it is in the lore, but when I look at that stat block, you're lying. Like, oh, these are crafty, ingenuitive, like kobolds, they're supposed to be these trap makers, and meanwhile they have like a negative intelligence and 0 wisdom. You're like, how?
Yeah.
How are they crafty? What are they? You're lying. You're wrong. Like,
right. Yeah. And so, so certainly I think you're doing a service to the community and, injecting critical thinking into it.
I mean, you see it over and over again, right? The game is loaded down with sacred calves. Like, there's no reason that ability scores should run from 3 to 18, aside from we used to roll for stats way back in the day, right? There's a bunch of things that just should be ended or should at least be criticized. And, that's what we wanted to do. Hopefully it's what we're doing.
Okay. All right. Well, I dig that. And I think that's a good way to look at it. Like, you're just both super passionate about it. And so that's why, that's what has fueled you to do the show, which I think, segues brilliantly into the next question. Do you currently, or have you ever played Dungeons and Dragons before?
Once or twice. No, honestly, life always gets in the way, and I've been moving around a fair bit, so we haven't had a regular game in quite some time. But like, Kill Every Monster hasn't stopped recording, so every couple of weeks I get to at least have a quick little game with Ram and some other fantastic person. I've met so many cool people through this show, so I'm certainly getting my fix.
Yeah. And yeah, because mostly you serve the role as the DM, and you conspire with the guest of the episode. Sometimes they also get to be like a DM, but the guest is usually controlling the monsters. But I want to say, hasn't there been an episode or two where maybe you've done a bit in the shoes of the player character, or am I misremembering?
I've done some odd NPCs. I know, like the dinosaur episode, I kind of played a tag-along party member for a ROM, but at the same time, like I think the closest I get is a DMPC. I think Dead Ghost Presents, we did an episode on a game called Hunter Hunted, which would, when you're listening to this, will have kickstarted successfully sometime in the past. I think that's the only show we've recorded where I've actually gotten to properly play. Everything else, I'm some sort of DM.
All right. Pretty cool. All right. And then, I'm just, we're just going through the questions, regular interview show style. So, this podcast, the focus, the sidekicks and the side quests. So, we've the focus on the little guy, the background actors. So this question, do you happen to have a favorite NPC or non-player character or, background actor, whether they be from a video game or an RPG, movie, film, television, etc.? And why is this character your favorite sidekick or your favorite NPC?
Unlike some people on this podcast, I'm going to be self-aggrandizing. In one of the first few games I ran, I had an NPC called Orson O'Hara. Orson wasn't meant to be his first name, but one of the characters walked in and I greeted him by his first name, and he just turned around and went, "Orson, it's so good to see you." And I wasn't going to say no at that point. So he got renamed, and now I don't know what it was supposed to be. But he was a halfling tailor who was also the local mob boss. And he was just one of those characters that the party kept coming back to because, frankly, when you're dealing with something like, obviously, organized crime has horrible elements to it. There are ways in which it's terrible. But the way in which it generally crops up is a certain degree of like, there will be an area or a group of people who are fully disregarded and unprotected. And you try to build some sort of order. And that's sort of what O'Hara was meant to be in that setting, was just in this area where no one gives a shit about anybody here. He's keeping a lid on stuff. He wants the place to be better. He doesn't particularly care about his position. He doesn't need to be doing it, but if no one else is doing it, he's gonna.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so kind of like the story in America being like, oh, these major metropolises, these immigration centers on the East
Mm-hmm.
Coast, and naturally, with the whole quote unquote natives, being so against immigrants, and then of course, naturally, that spurns immigrants to form gangs, and then even beyond gangs into like organized crime families and stuff like that to try and
Mm-hmm.
have that semblance of community and protection, even if it does fly in the face of what the law of the land is supposed to be.
Exactly. And that's sort of the thing. The city I was playing with was Majocracy, where they were fully like cracking down on like no divine magic. The only magic you can work with is arcane because that can be controlled. We can control who is learning to be a wizard. We can find the sorceress bloodlines and monitor them. But the moment you are a random person who is being gifted power from on high, that's out of our control. That needs to be
Mm.
kept in
So that
line.
means they also didn't like warlocks either, then I guess.
No, so this was something I was running in like very basic, I think, Pathfinder. So
Mm.
warlocks didn't exist at the time, or at least
Ah,
didn't exist in the way they do now.
sure.
Uh, so I had that sort of dichotomy set up, and in the middle you just had folks,
Hmm.
and they're not powerful enough to matter. Like if the guy in charge can cast fireball, the guy with a knife, not so big a threat.
Mm.
So that's where O'Hara sat, was just making sure that people who couldn't summon food got to eat.
Okay. Yeah, I could see how he would be a favorite, and
Mhm.
hopefully he's still a reoccurring character in your campaigns. Maybe he features somewhere hidden in the details of Kill Every Monster somewhere.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
All right. And then same thing with the side quest question. What happens to be your favorite side quest or B plot element? Again, whether it's from an RPG, video game, movie, film, television, etc. And why is this your favorite side quest or B plot element?
So the trick is the best side plots are the ones you don't realize are relevant, you know?
Hmm.
Uh over and over again, like take Avatar The Last Airbender, right? They get a hold of the meteoric ore, it eventually becomes Sokka's sword, right? That
Hmm.
becomes something incredibly important, but is more or less framed as just sort of this thing that happened.
Hmm.
I have a hard time answering that simply because a lot of side quests that I can think of are just beats
Hmm.
that you don't realize matter until later. The worst part of this is I was given this list ahead of time and I did not think to figure out the answer to this.
Well, I mean, it's fine and it's an
Mhm.
acceptable answer, certainly. I mean, we've had, all sorts of answers to the question of like, scenes, vignettes from, beloved Pixar movies to just
Yeah.
like anything that the players do that becomes a side mission, then becomes like the regular mission of the game. So, yeah, or even to just like collecting and mining basic minerals and stuff like that in video games, like doing the
Mhm.
crafting stuff. People love to turn off their brains, so it's like any number of things, interestingly. Yeah.
I'm going to come back to a different game that I ran where one of the first things that happened was a player was bit by a werewolf.
Oh,
So the entire
okay.
first arc of the campaign became get to the Temple of the Moon while it's still curable. And it was
Oh.
realistically just a side quest. It did not matter to the plot. I hadn't intended to infect anybody with lycanthropy. I
Mhm.
was just not paying enough attention when I was calling attacks, and I bit someone and then went, oh, yeah, con saves. But that gave me a framing device to just sort of wander them through a bunch of locations, start seeding elements for the rest of the game, and start introducing elements of the plot where the plot looked like it was get rid of lycanthropy. And then it turns out this was just a side quest that lets me sort of set the board, get you familiar with things. And now, when I launch what was supposed to be session two, uh, you have a better idea what's going on.
Mm. Yeah, so it invited the players to like be more immersed in the world.
Especially because, I mean, I think we're all guilty of this running games. You wind up with a lot of plot elements that are sort of things you could plan before you met the party,
Mm-hmm.
which, if you're doing your job well enough, they'll get invested in. But the thing they care the most about is themselves. If you want a party to start off invested, you threaten them.
Right. It's like Colville says, like, heroes in like action movies are reactive. They're not like proactive. So like stuff has to happen to them in order for them to like be like, all right, I'm here to kick butt and chew bubble gum and I'm out of bubble gum.
Even in an RPG, to be proactive, you have to have a context to operate in. You have to know why something is happening to say, oh, well, then that's up. You know, just telling the party, hey, there's an invading army. Well, there's 1,000 questions I have to ask before we know what the party's going to do about that. You know, they could pick either side depending on what the actual story is. So stuff like this, where you're just forcing them to be reactive for a minute, like I said, it seeds context, which then when you want them to be proactive, they're making informed choices, and you don't have that sort of choice paralysis of, well, we could do anything.
And then the final question that we have to round out the personal interview section, Dylan, what are you passionate about and why?
Oh, big questions. One of the things that matters to me in storytelling that I feel like, I won't say gets overlooked, but sometimes doesn't get served properly, is coherence, right? I was playing RPGs in like 2008 or so, I think is when I started. And that was prime, like 4chan was the big thing. And like, so you would see posts about things like, oh, there's a cave full of orcs. And then the DM told us that there wasn't any other exit except, you go in, you kill all the orcs, you come back out the same door. So we started a fire in the mouth of the cave, which is going to eat up all the oxygen, and we kill them. No, it doesn't. Like, it doesn't work that way because conservation of energy doesn't exist if magic exists. And if conservation of energy doesn't exist, chemistry doesn't exist, oxygen isn't real. Like, there is no basis for science. This is a completely different world. You have to play by its rules. And that's one of the things that I get a little bit fired up about in D&D. It's the old Pratchett rule of like, the world doesn't have to make sense in our world. It has to make sense in its world. It has to be narratively consistent. It has to be coherent in that respect. So you can do more or less whatever you want as long as, the world is self-consistent.
I was gonna say I immediately thought of the very first Thor movie where he's like, Thor's explaining to Jane Foster of like, these are the realms, and then what you call what you call science is magic in my world, and drawing Yggdrasil with all the worlds linked together. So, you wouldn't say that's the same for how you approach D&D, that magic is just science or science is magic, depending on your perspective.
That's the thing, is magic would be science to a certain extent, but that means that science a lot of the time doesn't work the same. Like I said, that the simple matters of fact of conservation of energy and conservation of momentum can't be true in a world where I can cast fireball. Or at least there are variables that are beyond the scope of physics. And the moment that's true, like in something that is so foundational, the rest of physics crumbles, and you can't just like blindly apply Newton's law, right? You're working in a new world. Stop trying to apply science to it and play by its rules. And things will get a little bit more fun for you.
Okay.
In the same vein as like, the world needs to make narrative sense, not scientific sense. It just has to be coherent in terms of like, when I say it to the players, do they just go, oh, when you tell them there's a full-on society of giants that lives in the mountains, the players are going to ask questions. Like, what do they eat? Are they farming up there? What are they farming? How do they, like, if they're eating chickens, how do they not kill all of the chickens accidentally? Okay, this is a place where we need to do world building. This is a place where we need to make the world make sense. in places where they're like, hold on, but you can't do that because that's not how physics works. Or I shot it with lightning. Why doesn't that spread through the water and electrocute everything? Well, the answer is, well, lightning is magic now. Just don't worry about it. Don't ask the questions that don't matter and don't affect the story. Don't apply the rules of our reality. You just want to tell a story that feels good as it's happening and makes enough sense to get by.
So with your smarts, with your physics smarts that you're working on and your love of like, ensuring that, the good storytelling is happening and it serves a purpose. It almost seems like then your role, certainly with Kill Every Monster and, and just in general in the space, it seems kind of like a safeguard, like you're kind of like a safeguarding of fun that you can be like the Bill Nye the Science Guy. Maybe you're not as showy and stuff like that, but you can be like,
Yeah.
well, actually, like these are the real principles that would exist in the physical world, but we have to remember we're in a world of magic and mystery and stuff like that. So it
Yeah.
wouldn't work for these specific reasons, but so it's educational in the sense that you can like tell someone like, hey, these are the three laws of Newton, and then people can walk away being like, oh yeah, well that was a good reminder, and we could still have a fun story and totally use the giant boulder to smash the intruders that were gonna sneak up on us in the night or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. It's just we wind up with a lot of people who ask the question like, "Oh, you're a physicist, so you must run a lot of sci-fi, or you must make worlds where like magic is like science and everything is." No, it means that I know what the rules would be if reality, like if physics applied to the game.
Mm,
But 99% of the time, if you start applying real world physics to the game is going to crack open and nothing works. So you
mm,
need to know that like I said, you need to focus on the world working, the world being narratively consistent. Because if you went through and just tried to make it work and have physics still apply,
mm,
you wind up with things like the peasant railgun, right?
mm,
Things that just fundamentally destroy your ability to tell a story or take any coherent action in the world.
mm. It's all as the Dispel Magic podcast would say. It's all the Wishinati's fault. That's why the world
Mhm.
can't work in a world of physics because the Wishinati's out there changing the rules.
Yep. Just magic. Magic means it's different. Stop asking questions.
All right. Well, we've made it through the interview section, and now it's time to head into some NPC creation. And NPC creation is brought to you by you, the podcast audience, and our patrons from Patreon. So now is the time of the show where we give a loud hurrah to our comfortable patrons and above. So to you, our queen of the Patreon, Goblin Katie, aka Katie Downey, as well as Anson Jablinski and good old mom and dad, we say cheers and we crack open. In this case, it just happens to be a can of Dr. Pepper, but whatever beverage, hopefully you are consuming responsibly as you are listening to this podcast. You are joining us in this huzzah as well. So, yeah, all of these people I mentioned are actually at a level where they get to introduce an element of chance to our random table. So, if Dylan's going to roll some dice here and make up an NPC, we could have some very interesting kind of a character today. So if you want to learn more about what the Patreon has to offer, you should go to the show notes below, go to my podcast website, or just go directly to patreon.com/sidekicks and side quests to learn about our accommodations that are awaiting for you. And, we welcome you near and far travelers to the levitating platter. Help us to expand our operations in this demiplane and worlds beyond. Okay, so after that song and dance, that spiel, yes, we are here in the NPC section of the show. And so typically, this is the point where we get to find out how we're diverging today in the wood. Are we going to be bringing a character to life that you have and you like want to walk through the questions and like reveal those answers? Or do you want to just roll some dice and then see what we make?
Well, if you're gonna give the whole spiel about the patrons altering chance and everything, like I have to make it worth their money. We gotta
There
roll
you
the dice.
go. Okay, perfect. Then we will roll some dice and we will generate a truly random NPC today. So, the first question we have to ask ourselves is what is going to be the character's name? We will get a d20 and we'll go ahead and give that a roll.
All right. We're looking at a 15, Kurt.
15. All right. Your answer was suggested by YouTuber, Super Geek Mike, aka Mike Christensen, Daniel.
Sticking to high fantasy for the day.
Well, we shall see. Let's see the next question. What is the ancestry of Dear Daniel? This we get to roll a D100, and we could swing wildly here and see what we get.
So we got a 34.
34. Ooh, okay. So what this choice says is Kurt Harmony homebrew of choice. So I have a number of like different sub races and different ancestries that I've invented myself. And if you would like a very quick tour of some of them, I can kind of like list them out real quick. Or if you want to re-roll again, we can do that. But basically, you know how there's herringons, and I was like, well, there's obviously other anthropomorphic rodent-like creatures that don't exist. So I have my own version of mouse folk and rat folk, as well as let's see, and we've got the Hulays, which are supposed to be like they're supposed to be like capybara people. Then we've got Bobyrs, which are like beaver people. Polka, which are, I believe they're supposed to be like the moles, and yeah, they're supposed to be like moles. Savanari are supposed to be like porcupine people, and then Orava are like the squirrel and the chipmunk people. So they come in a couple different flavors. I haven't gone out further on it, but there's a couple of other like land bird human anthropomorphs, penguins, some penguin folk. I have my own versions of dwarves, and I have my own version of elves as well.
Let's take a look at some beaver folk. I mean, we've talked about the physicist thing, but as the physicist from Canada, I feel like I got to do the job, you know?
Okay. All right. So you want to go with a Bobyr?
Yeah.
Okay. So very quickly here, as I work to pull up my DM notes that I wrote down on them, just so I could, educate not only my guests, but the podcast audience at large. And you can read all about Bobyrs yourself. They are available on the Patreon. So if you just are at the aristocratic level, you can get all the notes and all the skinny that I have on them. The ability score increase, dex by 2 or 1, or if you use Tasha's rules, typically around 60 years of life. Any alignment, typically medium sized, base walking speed 30 feet. I gave them dark vision. Let's see, sociable and friendly. You have a proficiency in the persuasion skill. Languages, common, elvish, and Mawir, which is the language of these rodentia. Let's see, trait, semi-aquatic. Bobyrs have a swimming speed of 30 feet. In addition, a Bobyr can hold their breath underwater for 15 minutes if they are doing non-strenuous activity. If a Bobyr is fighting or interacting with objects underwater, the time is reduced to half of the total time left, minimum of 30 seconds before suffocation rules apply. Tail attack. Not only is a Bobyr's tail good for swimming, it's also useful for attack and defense. For purposes of unarmed strikes, a Bobyr's tail is considered an unarmed weapon, and Bobyrs have proficiency with using their tails. When you successfully hit with a tail attack, roll 1d4 plus strength bludgeoning damage. And then we have the wood carving. Much like how dwarves who pursue the trade are considered experts on stonework, Bobyrs are natural arborists if they invest the time. Whenever you make an intelligence history check related to the origin of woodwork, you are considered proficient in the history skill and add double your proficiency bonus to the check instead of your normal proficiency bonus. In addition, you have the capability to chew through solid objects and structures that are made of wood. You can chew through 1 foot of these materials in 20 minutes if you are doing nothing else. Bobyrs.
There we go.
All right, very cool. All right, and now as I very quickly switch back to all my notes for how I run an episode and couldn't possibly forget the questions, you'd be surprised at how often I skip over a question if I'm not looking at my list. Okay, next question. What is the job or role in society for Daniel the Bobyr? This you just get to roll a regular D10.
All right. That is a 2.
A 2. Okay, well, your answer was provided by a Patreon supporter, my dad, Wayne Crenwelge, Master Baker. So Daniel is a Master Baker Bobyr. Maybe the Great British Bake Off or something like that. Who knows? And then let's see. Now we get to roll for an age range of the characters. This is just a D8 roll. Give us like a rough idea on the age range of our character.
Ooh, we got a 7.
7 would put Daniel at ancient. So he is an
I mean, he's a
ancient
master baker.
master
He's
baker.
been at it for a minute or two.
And then with all of these, at least starting key details in mind, when you think Daniel, a beaver folk who is ancient or is considered ancient, whether that literally means ancient or just ancient in his people's terms, and then is he's the master baker. What sorts of physical appearance details are coming to your mind when you're envisioning Daniel in your mind's eye?
I think at this point, if you've been at it for a while, I think all up his forearms, Daniel has basically burnt off patches of fur. The dangers
Okay.
of reaching into an oven, you know? He's we're gonna say we're looking at skinny chef, one of those people who like wakes up early, gets to work, is at it basically all day, might eat by the end of the day.
Okay.
So fairly small for what you would expect. A little bit beaten up, and it's basically just constantly wearing like coveralls at this point. You only burn yourself so many times before you start learning not to have exposed fur.
Right. And then I was gonna say, because he is a beaver folk, and his teeth, he's able to like, chew through wood fairly quickly. Is he like, I'm just wondering if he's like a sommelier for like different kinds of woods that he uses when he's baking. He's like, oh, I want this to have like a very oaky smell. So he's like, he chews like a bunch of oak logs down so he can set them down in the oven in the fire. So like all the smoke kind of like rolls over the whatever he's making that day.
We're going to say yes, despite the fact that my immediate inclination is to say if you've got a bunch of smoke going on in your oven, then you're probably burning too hot and you're going to up your bake.
We'll see. Maybe that's a little bit of my Texas bias showing with barbecuing. And I'm thinking like when he's
barbecue is
not
a whole
baking
different
sweets, he's making barbecue or something.
No, if you want to do like smoke infused into a custard, you can do some very, very interesting things with that. But I'm imagining like if you're baking bread or baking a cake, those things can be finicky and delicate. And the moment you have smoke going, you're going to the whole game.
Okay. All right. So maybe not doing that. That's maybe like on the weekends when he's like, I don't have any bread to bake. I'm just going to do like a brisket. And then he's like loading that thing down with like the best woods. All right. Okay. So he's got the coveralls. He's got, the patches of missing fur, and he's kind of like on the more slender side. Is he just like a single guy? Or, I mean, I know he's ancient, but is he like a single guy? Does he have a family, or like what's his situation like in that regard? I wonder if that informs like how he appears and stuff.
I think he's one of those people who has a good handful of close friends, right? Like loves entertaining, but has spent so much time on the craft that it's like that is the whole deal. Is I'm going to make beautiful food. I'm going to know enough people to share it with, and that's it. I don't need anything past that, as long as at the end of the day I can feed some friends, have a nice day, and then I'll go home and go to my own bed.
Yes, go to his nice burrow right by the river, and slap his tail down and make sure everything is structurally sound.
Exactly.
All right, and then let's see here. A way we help to kind of like narrow in with our NPCs. If you had to describe our Daniel with 3 adjectives, what 3 adjectives would you use?
It's going to be slow, thoughtful, and certain. Like he's making very discreet choices, taking the time to go through them, and when he's doing things, there's a certain degree of just this is what it's going to be. Like there is no questioning Daniel. These are just statements of fact by the time they come out of his mouth.
And it sounds like, he's running his own, like, is he running like his own pastry shop? Is he like in a fancy, aristocratic, sort of like a restaurant situation? Is he in the kitchens of the king and queen, or like, maybe you leave it open to a DM to figure out where they would put him, but like, where's your first instinct of like, if you're going to stick Daniel in a game of yours, where would you put him?
My favorite thing is always things like the movie Chef, right? You can learn all of these very, very high class skills, but there's a certain point where at the end of the day, if you want to enjoy cooking, you have to be making food that you like. I imagine that a lot of the skill, the way you became the master baker, was taking those sort of high class, high effort, high paying jobs. And at this point, it's one of those like niche, small town, like small bakery that is just immaculate. Everything that comes out of here is perfect. It doesn't make any sense that in this little sort of podunk village, there is this bakery churning out, perfect, like millefeuille, like high end patisserie stuff. But it's there. And if you notice it, you stop.
Yeah, so like all the adventurers know, like, oh no, you gotta stop in this town. Like you may sleep on it or whatever like that, but I will, I was hungover and I went and had one of those eclairs, and it was the best eclair I ever had in my life.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, very cool. And as now we get to go back to do some more dice rolling, which is everyone's favorite thing to do. We like our NPCs to have something valuable on their person. So whether that's going to be a physical item, a piece of lore, a secret, or an ideal or concept that they might ascribe to. So this is where we get to do a combination roll where we do a D4 first for the category and then a D6 for the particular thing.
We got the far ends of things. We got a 1 and a 6.
1 and a 6. Interestingly enough, this is a valuable item submitted by our previous guest, Max Chiquino. Daniel has an astrolabe, and that's valuable to him. Why is that valuable to him?
The king and queen, like there was a point where he was in the royal house baking. Everybody appreciates the work, but there's a certain point where the only people you can talk to are craftsmen. And it was the court mage, the astronomer, who was the one who was like coming down and recognizing, like, when you hit a certain point, you're just like, oh God, there's so much technique invested in this. There is precision. There is some beauty to it. And they would talk endlessly about, how do you make these choices? How do you sort of experiment and play with the ingredients you have to hand to make new spells, new foods, just new ideas? How do you conceptualize something that doesn't exist and have it come out to be the perfect version of a thing that has never been before? And this was one of those sort of parting gifts of, you're going to move somewhere, you're going to be out in the middle of nowhere, you won't be able to stop by, the tower, you won't be able to use the telescope and see the stars. Take the stars with you.
Ooh.
And so this was just a simple gift from a friend as far as David's concerned, but anything you get from a court magician should probably be scrutinized further than a baker is capable of pulling off.
Interesting. Okay, so potentially seeding it for like some kind of like, higher level magic item that's in his possession without him necessarily knowing, or it's some sort of MacGuffin that could become important to the plot of the adventure or something like that. If you have Daniel in your world and he's this master baker, but he just happens to have an astrolabe in his possession.
Do something simple like, he got home one day, he looked at it and just laughs to himself. He thinks of it as a gag gift because the stars are wrong. Like, that's not what the sky looked like. It's for some other plane the players need to get to or whatever,
Ooh. Okay. That's
or it's
pretty
how the
cool.
stars were at an important date. Who knows? You're a DM. Come up with it yourself.
Right. Well, what was it? Well, speaking of Atla, now that it's in my mind, what was it? The library. They had to go to Tongshi's library so they could figure out like what was the sky like, so we could figure out what's the thing that's coming. Oh, Sojun's comet. Like we have to know like when it's coming, based on the last time that it was.
Exactly. You can pull all kinds of stuff with that kind of thing.
There we go. Okay. And then, of course, we like all of our NPCs to be able to offer side quests. So at this point, there's one last dice to roll, which is the D12. Or if you feel inspired, and you can think of you care about logical consistency with the story. Maybe you can use the dice roll as the launching off point. But yeah, let's figure out what's a side quest that Daniel would be willing to offer a bunch of heroes or player characters to go and do.
For a D12, we got a 7.
7. Okay, your answer was provided by previous guest Scarlet64 of the Instagrams and TikToks. It says here, retrieve a secret lost self-portrait painting from a famous artist to complete an otherwise formalized collection. And it's the painter's soul repository. Is that something logical that Daniel would be able to offer up? Do you want to re-roll, or is that like a springing off point?
We're going to take a second. We're going to see if we can make this work. Because I feel like this is something that on request, you would have to know what it is. That is, because you can always do stuff like, I demand payment, I expect to get this, you know. You could do that sort of thing, but I don't think that quite lines up. And so you wouldn't have them go get this painting just because you're owed payment for something and you happened to accidentally get effectively a phylactery. No, I think we're going to re-roll this one.
Okay, go for it. Yeah, another D12.
There's some walking around you could do to make it work, but how's a 3 turn out?
Ooh, perfect. Okay, this answer was provided by my previous guest and my cousin Seth Krenwelge. Retrieve the 3 Orbs of Harglax. So what are the 3 Orbs of Harglax?
I don't know that he knows. I think it might just be one of those situations of adventurers are always showing up and asking for things. They're always looking for quests. And there comes a certain point where he's just spouting off things that this wizard told him about.
Oh. Yeah.
And there's a certain degree of just, I don't know, go get these for me. And he's got the astrolabe there. So maybe he's even like putting on a show. This is like one of the few cracks to that serious facade of just the adventurers hounding people for quests and looking for important things to do. And it's just, go bring me the mystical orbs. Like, what are you talking about? You're a baker. Why do you know about these? Pull out the astrolabe and go, I am much more than I seem to be. They leave, and there's just a moment of, oh, God. Here's hoping they don't come back.
So it's his way of like, sometimes you go through these small towns and like, the city folk come in and it's like the way of the country folk, like messing with the city folk of like, watch out for, jackalopes, they're going to get you at your campsite if you don't string up some beans in the trees or whatever. And they're like, I don't know any better. You live here in the country, so you must know this more than me.
If you're going to do that, you string up something more valuable as food, and then you just have like kids in the middle of the night come steal it.
Right, exactly. And then they believe it. Like
meet up in the middle, strung up around camp, kids stealing a bunch of venison. Like, oh no, the jackalopes ate it.
Yeah. Okay. So Daniel doesn't necessarily know what these 3 Orbs of Harglax are. It's just something he remembers from his thoughtful, deep, provoking conversations with this court wizard. So it's up to the DM to figure out like, are these like an impossible ancient artifact? Are they just sort of like a knockoff goof item? Is it like how learned arcane people might throw around like some sort of idiom or parlance or something like that? Like, it's no 3 Orbs of Harglax, but you take what you can get. And he just kind of like repeats that, parrots it without understanding what it really is.
I think that's exactly right. It's just, he's just parroting it. And I think to cut forward to your next question, the reward for succeeding is just the next phase of that quest line, which is, are those, okay, you're going to need to go talk to so-and-so. You're going to need to hit the royal court. Their mage is going to know what those are. From what he was saying, they're important, but I wasn't sure they were a thing. I just wanted you to leave.
Okay, so this is the perfect way to introduce like, okay, I have this great sort of like magic item MacGuffin, like, big interdimensional plot that I want to introduce into my game. Okay, well, I'll have this baker, throw them on a red herring sort of chase, but then they actually succeed. And now that kicks off the timer for like, okay, well, now that these orbs of Harglax are in your possession, like you need to do something with them, or else like Thanos is going to come popping in and wanting to conquer the realm or whatever.
Honestly, I think that might work out better for like you send them to find them, they find the first one. You get to introduce your big bad as somebody who like was trying to get to it and you got in the way and whatever. And when you're coming back to go like, okay, we found the first one, but we need to figure out where to find, that's where you get like, I don't know, I just wanted you to leave. So they're not important, but there was this guy there was a guy you were okay, what? No. If there is a devil after you, you definitely need to leave. You can't be here.
Okay.
I don't know what it is. I was just trying to get, you need to go talk to him. If this is important enough for devils to be after it, you need to go figure out what it is. And that ain't my job. I do the pastries.
Okay. And if the players try and push back as far as like some kind of reward, Daniel's not going to be able to give them anything. He's just going to be more insistent on like, you need to leave. I can't, like here, take some bagels for the road.
Yeah.
Like that's it.
This is a person whose life goals was this, exactly what he's doing. Like he doesn't have much outside of what he needs to keep the shop running. He might be able to throw some gold at him, but frankly, it might even be sending them with the astrolabe just as a fundamental like, no, you can't flash the orb to people. Like if it's that important, if people are after it, you can't flash that to them. So you need to get to court and you need to show them this and tell them you're there for the mage. They'll bring him to you.
Okay. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Like just give them the lab, and then even if the players examine it, they can be like, oh, these are the constellations of what they look like from Limbo, the first circle of hell, or something like that.
Yeah, you can. There's plenty of ways to make that one fly. And then, of course, that becomes a thing that can come back later. You can start feeding the quests through the mage to find the other two orbs. Whatever you need to.
Yeah.
Or send them to destroy the first one because the set needs to be completed, and you can just do either the villain has one and you need to stop him from getting all three, or maybe he has two and now you're being hunted.
Okay. So then this seems like it feeds into the other flip side of the question, like what's going to be the consequence of failure or refusing the call to the adventure. Is that, he's meaning it as a joke, but really there is something ticking in the background. So if the players fail, that's kind of like the condition of like, oh, well, this actually is a thing, and we need to go back to Daniel and figure out what to do next. He kicks him over to the wizard, or this is like, I don't know what could be the consequence for failure or refusing.
I think this is one of the times where it loops back onto almost the reward, in that if they fail and obviously don't die in the process, it's going to be they're going to somehow lose a boss fight and someone else is getting away with the orb, and they're going to go back to report to Daniel, who gives them the same sort of spiel of, one, that was real, two, somebody stole it? Okay, no, I don't know why you would steal that, but if you want that question answered, and it sort of feeds back into the same path, refusing the call, frankly, you get a little bit further down the line, you get the person that would have been the boss there showing up already having the orb and announcing, you think you have me beaten, but using the Orb of Harglax, I will finally, and have, the one person who was paying attention 15 sessions ago go, the Orb of, isn't that what the beaver said?
Right. So doing kind of like the Ronan the Accuser was his name, the Kree guy who didn't believe that the Civil War was over. So he's like, I've got the Power Stone, and I was supposed to turn it over to Thanos, but I'm gonna see to destroying all of Xandar or whatever. And then our guardians of the galaxy, if you will, have to then be like, oh, well, actually, this is important. We do need to like intervene and stop this if we don't want everything to be destroyed.
Exactly. It almost, refusing the call again just sort of puts them back on the track where you fight the villain, you kill him, and you take the orb, and you're like, should we go back to that beaver?
Yeah. Who then just be like, go talk to my wizard friend. Like, I just bake. That's what I do. That's funny. That very anticlimactic, where they're expecting him to reveal like, I'm some ancient mystical long hidden arch wizard. It's like, No, I'm just friends with the wizard. I don't actually do anything other than bake.
Yeah. And depending on, the relationship the players develop, that can very easily be like, okay, look, I'll come with you, I'll make the introduction. That can be
Mhm.
sort of your major reward, is just sort of greasing the wheels, making sure this sort of thing happens.
Mhm.
Ranging out to like, no, absolutely not. I am not getting involved in that. I was just saying it because it was the thing he kept saying. Get out of my shop. Yeah.
Right. Okay. And then do you feel like this pretty well rounds out Daniel as a character? Or are you interested in exploring some more optional questions?
I'm looking over the optional questions, and I think, frankly, like, these are great for characters that are more like directly tied into the plot. I think Daniel is someone who is happy living his life,
Mm.
like, has useful information, is going to send you on the track to get to some adventure. But Daniel doesn't want adventure. Daniel is happy now. Please stop asking him for adventures.
All right. Well, now that we've made it through NPC creation, it's time to head into a random encounter. This random encounter is brought to you by my sponsor, Zencastr. Zencastr came into my life when I didn't think I would need it, but now I definitely need it with trying to raise a family and keep the podcast episodes flowing and all that stuff, and not trying to keep myself awake for all hours of the night trying to get these episodes edited. Thanks to Dane and Benjamin over at Dispel Magic showing me this service, I was hooked and I decided to become a paying member so I could get access to all these awesome tools with editing and getting these great episodes to you. So it is so easy and super easy now to record a podcast with Zencastr. You log into your browser and you start recording a high quality podcast right away. You could record studio quality sound and up to 4K video with your guests. Feel a sense of zen, knowing Zencastr's multi-layered backups ensure you always have your recordings in the highest quality, even if the connection is unstable. A hard sell. On that point alone, I would, I've been podcasting for a couple of years now. That is amazing. So that is a great selling point of this service. You can sound your best. Have you ever worried what you might sound like on a podcast? With Zencastr's post-production process, it makes you sound buttery smooth. It automatically removes the ums and ahs as you click on that feature in the post-production settings, and in your recordings, it's going to remove those awkward pauses and conversations too with the click of a button. Set the right podcast loudness and levels while reducing background noise with a click of a button. It really is that easy. It's all in one. If you have thought about podcasting before and realized that you need a lot of different tools and services, those days are done. With Zencastr's all-in-one podcasting platform, you can create your podcast all in one place and distribute to Spotify, Apple, and all other major podcast destinations. Go to zencastr.com/pricing and use my code SIDEKQPodcast, and you'll get 30% off your first month of any Zencastr paid plan. I want you to have the same easy experiences I do for all my podcasting and content needs. It's time to share your story. Again, the website, zencastr.com/pricing. Use the code SIDEKQPodcast and get 30% off your first month of any Zencastr paid plan. Thank you so much to the sponsor, and back to the podcast. And all right, we are now here in the random encounter section. So much like on your podcast, we do like a role play vignettes. Hopefully no one's having to roll dice or actually do combat, but it's just kind of like lighthearted slice of life just to get an idea and a voice to our NPC that we've made today. So I think you're going to do a fantastic job as Daniel, our master baker, Bobyr. But the question becomes, who am I going to be in this scene? Am I going to be one of my adventuring podcast characters that comes into the shop and then you're annoyed, so you give me the quest? Am I one of the other townsfolk, or am I even possibly this archmage court wizard that's giving you the final goodbye and the astrolabe and all this stuff? I don't know. What kind of scene are you interested in?
I think let's just do the adventurer.
Okay. Oh, the adventure. Okay. So now I
Yeah.
get to roll out the carpet for the long list of names of possible heroes that we could meet. So we've got Duncan, who's the recklessly brave adventurer for hire, happy go lucky, no feat too small, no task too daring sort of a guy. We have Sonia, who is the warrior woman who started off as a barbarian and then multi-classed into a paladin who serves to redeem the undead. Then we have Korak, who is the lawful evil arcane trickster roguish dwarf. We have Chrisley, who is the herbalist, botanist, wood elf druid, who then multi-classed into a cleric who serves living memory. We have Orion, who is the astral elf illusionist wizard. We have Agape, who is the lilac-colored tiefling Sorlock. So started off as a wild magic, fey wild sorcerer, and then made a pact with one of the archfey NPCs made on the podcast. And then most recently, we have Lifespell, the necromancer forest gnome, old guy, and he has his faithful skeleton manservant, Octavius. And so those are the characters that so far have been made for the podcast. So if any of those seem like they would be a good foil for Daniel today, we could introduce them in the scene. Or if none of them sound interesting, I'm perfectly down to introduce a new one.
Let's take the Sorlock forward.
The Sorlock, Agape. Okay. So would you like to go ahead, since you have great DM muscles, would you like to go ahead and set the scene?
I think on Daniel's end, we are getting into the finicky parts of things. Like the bakery is like, we're talking early morning, wrapping up the last couple of things. There's a bunch of stuff that's like half decorated, but got interrupted because a bake time is just about up. Pulling like half like blind baked pastry shells out of the oven, trying to make sure that like the 10 different plates he's got spinning are all fine. The front of the shop is empty, but unlocked simply because it's a small town. People who are coming in and waiting are the locals, right? There's nothing to worry about. So as you're sort of entering through the front of the shop, you can smell things like the butter is just wafting through the entire place. It reeks of richness. There are a handful of things like, simple fruit tarts, things where like it was just a matter of putting some custard and some berries into a shell and just leaving it on the shelf. Well, in the back, there is the constant sound of motion, but no banging, no clanging. All of the motions are smooth and measured, if a hair frantic.
And so, coming off her last adventure, Agape we last saw with Pyrex, the little Herringon kid, and she had finished this mission with getting him a sunstone, some ancient item that he had only heard about in stories, and she ended up bringing it back to his chicken coop. And so now she has like this whole Easter basket that's like full of all of these interesting, like wildly different colored eggs and various sizes as well. Like especially the gigantic one that came out of a regular chicken, but it's easily like the size of an ostrich egg. That's like the centerpiece of this basket. And we'll say it's sometime after that. And so she's, enjoying this basket. And she comes into the shop because she's just hungry for a pastry. And she's, the door bell chimes, ding-a-ling-a-ling. And she comes in and she's like looking around and smelling and just like, oh, wow, this all smells great. And, oh, Pyrax was so nice to give me this basket with all these eggs. And hello, is there someone here? Hello?
Hold on a second. Hold on. And there's the bustling forward of just like holding a pan that like you can see the steam rising off of a handful of like very recently put together like muffins. And it's in a bare hand. The sort of asbestos hands you get from being a chef where like this has been left to cool exactly long enough to not damage tissue, but not long enough to not hurt. Just coming forward, sliding in, and just you're gonna have to shout in order. I've just got some things to wrap up in the back. Strictly speaking, I don't think we open for another I got at least 10 minutes to go here, but it's all good. You're good. Just what do you need? Is just running back like, and honestly I think just comes back out with like a half decorated cake on a cake stand and just starts like piping decorations to the side as they're talking, just to make just greasing the wheels.
Sure.
Allowing the conversation to happen.
Yeah, I think she's just like I think she's just kind of like overwhelmed by seeing all the masterpiece stuff going on. So she's got a little bit of like the inherent uh Feywild magic in her blood, but then she's also got like the balance or enhancement depending on your perspective
Mhm.
from the Archfey Warlock pack. So she's like equally delighted, but seeing all the perfection in the shop, she just there's like a tickling in the back of her head that's like, wouldn't it be funny if just like something exploded randomly? Like she
Mhm.
has that thought, but she's trying to behave herself. And so, Daniel can see this in her body language. And she's like looking around trying to figure out what she wants to get, but she's like, she's balling up her hand and her free hand into a fist, and she's like she's really fighting temptation, but then she's holding this basket, and so then maybe she takes her free hand and she starts at least absentmindedly sort of petting the egg for no reason other than to distract
Mhm.
herself from giving into more base chaotic desires or whatever.
I understand that there's a lot of choices to make. I do have to advise you that it's a hard rule, no spell casting in the shop. This is a place of mundane skill and work. I don't know what you got going on there. I don't know what wizard you do. We don't cast spells in here.
Now she pouts. Now she feels like a little girl who's been scolded. And she's just kind of like, oh, well, hopefully you don't mind these. And she like holds up her basket to show off the eggs. Does Daniel react seeing eggs of this color and variety of sizes?
I think there's like an immediate, like, you see the pause, you see the calculation of just, what could I do with that? The trouble being that, frankly, when you get to eggs, I think that's something where I don't know that it would really fascinate a baker. Like, shy of, like, you could use duck eggs, they're a little bit richer, but like the major thing is ratios in a lot of baking. So seeing a massive egg, I think the first thought is, I don't know what's in that. That's
Oh, a chicken like this.
long pause of just staring at her, like waiting for the smile to crack. Just,
Mm-hmm.
no, it didn't.
Oh, it did. It did. And then
Bigger
she
than a
goes
chicken.
off in the whole tale.
Nope.
She tells you exactly of getting the sunstone and bringing it over to Pyrex's farm, and that they raise chickens, and then she's like, yeah, and then I came back a couple days later, and that little sweet little boy presented me with this whole basket of eggs, and yeah, true
The
story.
cake is now fully decorated as this talk has gone on. There was a point, maybe like 4 sentences deep, where he realized that this was going to be a novel length narrative and just tuned out. Fully irrelevant to me. I'm glad that happened to you. Do you know what you want, though?
And she's sitting there twiddling her fingers and on her chin, and then she's like, well, I mean, that looks good, that looks good. And then just thinking of, and she's like, well, that Pyrex is a sweet boy. Are you sure, like, are you good for eggs? Because I mean, like, they're just down the road on the coast, and like a sweet little place. I'm sure maybe you've even passed by their farm a time or two.
No,
Like,
I got some folks in town. I make sure they have bread. They make sure I have eggs. It's a lovely little feedback loop. The eggs make more bread. Uh, we keep everything going. The town is lovely. We try to keep everybody moving along. I don't need your weird big chicken egg.
all right, and then she gets sad and she finally makes her selection. She points to like six things, and then she's like, all right, I guess I'll have that. She looks sad.
He like wraps him up and goes, look, you seem like the type who needs adventures to get by. And I
Yeah.
appreciate that. I respect that. You're the sort of person who gets things done for people who need things doing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't. It's okay to sit down for a minute. You got your big eggs, enjoy them, I guess. You don't need to cause trouble. Okay? Okay? You're going to eat these. You're going to enjoy it. I need you to take a minute. Just look at the sun. It's a beautiful day. The water's going to be nice. Have a nice time and just relax. Nobody needs magic sunstones or big chickens. It's all good.
I'm wondering if while you're talking to her and saying that, she's like turning her head as if she's hearing like some sort of like archfey whispering in her ear, and it's not her doing, but I think because of the interaction and how it's gone, And I think just because of the archfays, she likes to have fun. Like she's doing her whole thing with fighting the nearby town that's, getting that encroaching mageocracy and industrialization thing. So this is one of the smaller, sleepier towns that hasn't succumbed to that quite yet, but she still likes to have fun and stuff like that. So I think just for the heck of it, the archfey somehow, not her doing, but the archfey causes something to clatter or scatter or like explode out. Maybe the cake. He was working on the cake. Well, that cake suddenly is now like shot up to the ceiling and just splattered out. And then Agape starts laughing, and then she like covers her mouth. She's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I swear I didn't do that. I'm sorry. I think that was that Prosperina. That was Prosperina. Oh wait, shoot, I'm not supposed to say her name. I didn't do that."
I would like it very much if you were to pick up your order and just please leave my shop.
Are you sure there's not something I could do for you to make it up to you? I really could.
I'm very confident that I have things under control. I worked very, very hard to make sure that I didn't need adventurers in my life. Trust me, the court, I saw enough adventurers come through. You bring more trouble than you're worth. You blow up cakes despite paying for pastries that are worth less than a single cake.
She holds up an egg as like a form of like, I could barter this for money to bake up for the cake.
I'll tell you what, rather than bartering your beautiful egg, because it's a lovely egg and I'm sure you're enjoying having it very much, what if you kept your egg and instead left my shop so that you could not damage more of my things?
You're really sure there's not something I can do for you? Some sort of like fabled thing that would make you an even better baker?
Yeah, I need magical artifacts to make me a better baker. I have a whole rule about spellcasting in the shop, but I would like you to bring me a magical, powerful artifact. Find me the Three Orbs of Harglax so that I can become the ultimate baker. That's really the thing that I need out of you right now.
And she rolls an insight check and critically fails, so she does not capture or catch the sarcasm. And she's like, "Oh, this is the thing." And then she hears like her archfey kind of like whispering in her ear somehow. She's like, "Yeah, this is the thing I need to go do. Like, obviously, my organization could really use this, maybe to help combat all these pesky mages in the nearby town that are like trying to pollute everything and ruin things. They're coming out this way, aren't they?"
Every like couple of syllables, one of the eyebrows just gets slightly higher of just, yeah, that would be very helpful if you would go do that as quickly as you could so that we could stop the mages or whatever.
Okay. Yeah, so she gets fired up. So she's like ready to go on this mission because she sees it as like this is furthering of her goals, of her organization's goals. So she like without even asking you, she like grabs your hand to shake it, like you've struck a deal. And then she does pick one of her eggs that looks very much like a flamboyant Easter egg, and she sets it on the counter, and then phew, she like hightails it out the door. And what's the last thing that Daniel's thinking or saying before the scene closes out?
Daniel grabs the egg, walks over, and on his way back into the kitchen, just puts it down next to this astrolabe, this like beautiful, precisely like engineered, machined object. Just sets it over there because, again, don't know what to do with that. Comes back with like a box of salt and just a couple of random like metal utensils, and just like draws a line of salt across the doorway and just leaves a couple of just iron like bits and bobs like right inside. If I never see another Faye again in my life, I swear to God, it'll be too soon.
The camera pans out on the astrolabe and the egg. There's like a very faint sort of like peck, peck, peck coming from inside the egg. And scene. So there we go. We were able to present Daniel in his little vignette. So what did you think it was like getting to be Daniel?
I am very familiar with playing tired of some. It is always fun to do.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's one of the major assumptions in RPGs is the importance of player characters, and I do think you should honor that for your players most of the time. But every once in a while, it's important to have somebody who just does not care how good at magic you are. I need to do my job. Please stop that.
Right. And yeah, no, it's always good to just have like the normal folks because, like,
Yeah.
even the in these superhero movies and stuff like that, or The Boys or whatever it is, it's like there are people that are just living their everyday lives. Not everyone is super powered or
Mhm.
super enhanced or anything like that. So it is nice when player characters can just genuinely interact with someone of the world who, as you mentioned, with the earlier part of the show, is like they are living by the rules of which this place exists. And so they're embodying all those, and especially those that are, when these NPCs are being like quote unquote antagonistic, they're not
Mhm.
necessarily rolling over for the players. They're just like, look, this is my life. These are the things I do. These are the rules and the code of ethics I abide by. And you being ridiculous in front of me is not going to get me to change, kind of a thing.
Yeah. Not even necessarily like, again, it's a bit of a subtlety, but like the players always will perceive it as the NPC being antagonistic. But it's really just drawing the line under the fact that the players are antagonizing the barkeep.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is just a guy doing his job. Stop that.
Yeah. And so we are here now in the final thoughts section of the show. So I always like to just, get everyone's feedback and vibes on their overall experience on my silly little podcast.
It's always a good time to generate NPCs and figure out ways to tell more stories. Like, anything you come up with, you can always put it in your back pocket, have somewhere for it later.
And, I try to be very good about not just arbitrarily inviting myself on other people's podcasts or trying to shoehorn the NPCs made on this podcast. But, it sounds like Daniel would be a good fit for an adventure on Kill Every Monster. Just like, hey, I'm just a shopkeep. Kind of like when you did the human episode and stuff like that. It's like,
Mhm.
hey, we're just normal people. We're just trying to live our lives. And then, the adventurers coming into the scene and causing trouble.
It always depends on the guests. It always depends on the guests. I never really know 100% what I'm going to run until we are most of the way through the discussion section. You know the deal. You have guests on all the time. If the
Mhm.
guests aren't having fun, if they aren't enjoying themselves, why am I wasting your time?
Mhm.
So everything has to be engineered to make sure that the guests are having fun.
Amen to that. Yeah, for sure. We like everyone to have fun, make cool little NPCs and come out the other end smiling. So, with that, as we're here in the final moments of the show, if there's anything you want to plug, where can you be found on social media, all that stuff, and then if you have any passions or causes that we need to be made aware of.
For the time being, I think you can just find me on whatever you call it. I'm not going to stop calling it Twitter. At DJ Malenfant. You can find Kill Every Monster at KEM Podcasts or wherever you find your podcasts. And you can find the network at large at Dead Ghost Pro.
Excellent. Well, Dylan, thank you so much. I know, we were going to have a ROM, but you know what? That just makes me hungry to go seek out a ROM, have him be his own guest. And then, you know what? We're going to get the boys together and you're going to have your own episode together.
Just means we get to plug the show more.
There you go. Happy to do so. So, again, thank you so much. Take care, and we'll have you back on to make even more interesting NPCs. Thank you for listening to this episode of Sidekicks and Side Quests. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast through Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Amazon Music, Overcast, or YouTube, or feel free to save the RSS feed to use the app or player of your choice. Visit our website, sidekicksandsidequests.com, for links, write-ups of the NPCs, and to learn more about the show and the guests who have been on it. To stay up to date and interact via social media, you can follow the podcast on Facebook, Instagram/Threads, Twitter/X, and Reddit by searching for Side KQ Podcast. You can also find our small Discord community as well online. I would love to talk D&D and showcase your fan art, stories of how you used our NPCs, discussions, and commentary. And hey, if you'd like to hail the bard and send me a message, an email, you can do so by communicating with sidekicksandsidequests@gmail.com. To help this show be the resource it's meant to be, I ask that you leave a review on iTunes. 5 stars, please. to help spread the word and share our podcast with your friends and family. Whether you're a veteran player or an aspiring dungeon master, there's something here for everyone, and I want to hear about it. As mentioned in the NPC creations section of the podcast, I do in fact have a Patreon for Sidekicks and Sidequests. If you love this podcast and what we're trying to do here, I would appreciate it if you would just go to the website, patreon.com/sidekicks and sidequests. No matter your lifestyle expenses, we have wonderful rewards at every level of Patreon membership tier. Modest, comfortable, wealthy, and aristocratic accommodations await, and we welcome all patrons to the Levitating Platter. Seriously, your financial support allows for this passion project to continue to invest in itself through the tools that will take our production to the next level, as well as provide more content for our patrons and the community at large. Please consider supporting me on Patreon if you can.
Sidekicks and Sidequests is unofficial fan content permitted under the fan content policy.
Meaning I'm not approved or endorsed by Wizards.
Portions of the materials used are property of Wizards of the Coast.
Copyright Wizards of the Coast,
LLC.
Thank you for your support, and I'll see you at the pub next time.
Bar to rock on 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Sidekicks and Sidequests.